Hey, good people. My name is Janae Brown, and I am the founder and the senior publisher of Open Book Publishing. And here at Open Book Publishing, we help leaders become authors by publishing their books in 180 days or less with our done for you publishing services. And if you don't know, Open Book Publishing has powered Dear Authors, and Dear Authors is created as a resource for authors to learn the ins and outs of all things writing and book publishing. So today's episode is something that you all need to know, and that is how to create a book design cover for your book. All things design elements in and out the book, but primarily the cover of your book. And so we have the one and only Miss Chazney Thomas, who is the creative director, art extraordinaire, who's going to be joining us today. So, hey, girl, hey, how are you, Miss Chazney?
Hey. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to jump in and talk about all things design.
I'm so glad to have you because I have worked with multiple designers, with multiple authors, but Chazney is the most sought out. And they don't know it's Chazney, right? Like they don't know her name, but they be like, who did Pieces of a Woman? But let me tell you something. That girl named Chazney V. Thomas, okay? She did her dang on thing. So, Chazney, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started. Who is Chazney besides the brainchild behind Pieces of a Woman?
Well, I am a creative director and designer born and raised in Miami, Florida, but I currently reside in Southwest Georgia. I have over 10 years of experience as a graphic designer, designing for a variety of industries, but I proudly design for my own personal brand, Frotality.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just a girl who loves color, loves design, and most of all, the reason why I design is because I love people. So everything I do is very people centric,
Mm.
very relational oriented, and that's where I lead with my design.
I love that. Very people centric. Okay. We love this good language. Okay. You know, over here in the public space, we love the words. We love the
Yes,
words.
come on,
Okay.
come on.
But you know, the words are important, but the art is what captivates.
Mhm.
It's almost like walking down the street and you see a guy and it makes you stop. We don't know if he got teeth in his mouth. We don't know if he got a job. We don't know if he loved the Lord, but it's something about his aesthetic that makes you
Aesthetic and cologne, possibly.
right, that makes you
Correct.
stop and turn. And so I said that because, you know, I love the words, I love the inside of the book, but most people are not going to open the book if the cover is not doing what it need to do.
Right,
You know,
correct.
if the guy not fine, who walking by?
Or even we go and buy nasty stuff at the grocery store, but because the packaging was cute, we will
Hmm.
stop and go pick something up. It doesn't matter the cost. We're like, okay, this is cute. What is this? You know, the way it's presentation is everything.
Presentation is everything. And so I said that to say, and I love that you said presentation is everything because we hear that all the time. But in the publishing space, it's true. Presentation is everything. And it's important for your design work to draw your audience and draw your readers because that's going to be their first connection to your book. And
Right.
so I will argue that the cover design and marketing go hand in hand. It's almost as if the cover design is a aspect or an element of marketing. What would you say to that, Chastity? Like, what are your thoughts?
I would say that your book cover design is your first draw. It's the way
Mm,
people are introduced to you even before they read your name, essentially. So the title of your book and the art on your book are going to be the draw where people have their first interaction with you. And I would say that your book cover lays the foundation for your marketing. So that is
okay.
the first thing people see, but your marketing is the strategy behind getting more visibility. So people want to be captured visually, but then the marketing itself carries out that visibility so you have that reach for more readers, more potential readers to be introduced to your book and then sales and so forth. But your book cover lays that foundation. And if you're going to create a marketing strategy, essentially that marketing strategy has to correlate with the cover. The colors, design, and all of those elements will be built out into that so-called campaign, essentially. So
Mhm.
on all of the channels where you'll be doing your marketing, your cover and pieces of those design elements should thread through to kind of create your whole package.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely see how the marketing is the strategy, but the aesthetic or what brings the marketing to life is the design elements that are captivated within the book cover. Is
Correct.
that accurate?
Correct.
And now that you say that, as you were talking, Chaz, what I kept thinking about was, back in the day, they used to always say, don't judge a book by its cover, but we do.
We do. We do. We do.
Book, like a physical book or
Yes.
just like a
Yes.
representation of something. We judge, your reader's going to judge your book by its cover.
Correct.
That's it. That's all. They're going to judge the book by its cover. So it's very important. And I spend a lot of time working with my authors, especially in the writing phase of publishing, talking about studying your reader and creating a manuscript that's digestible for them, that's understandable for them, that's right at their education level, that's going to transition them from one point to the other. But you also have to keep your reader in mind when you are doing the aesthetic version of marketing, which is creating this book cover design. I had a person, and I don't know if I did say this somewhere. I had someone, bless her heart, she DM'd me on Instagram and was asking me if I liked her book cover. Loved her book cover.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't think the book was going to sell.
Okay.
And the reason why is because she was writing to teenage boys,
Mm-hmm.
but she was a part of a sorority. She is a part of a
Oh,
sorority. And she loves her sorority. So the colors of the book was based upon the sorority. I was like, the teenage boys, though?
those are two polar opposite ends of the spectrum. I think we also have to consider that sometimes our personal likes
Mm-hmm.
may not be the solution for what we want to show to our target audience.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to leave your personal preferences behind in order to be effective, and sometimes that's hard. Like
Mhm.
that's very hard. That's, going back to when you were talking about, we may look on the outward side of a person, you know what I'm saying? Like it kind of correlates, like, oh, I have my list of how I want somebody or something to look, but at its
Mhm.
core, they might be presenting something totally different. So I'm over here looking on the outside at something that's pretty, that's feminine, that's flowery, or, has the colors of my sorority. But if I'm wanting to reach a totally different
Different
audience,
audience.
we got to have a meeting of the minds and make sure that whatever's being presented on the outside is for the right target audience.
It's reflective, and it's
Yes,
important for there to be synergy.
for sure.
Like you definitely need, because you don't want to confuse your audience. And you can confuse your audience in a way that's, they don't buy the book because they don't think the book is for them. They think the book is from somebody else based upon your book
Correct.
cover. And then, or you attract the audience you were not anticipating.
Hmm.
And then they start reading the book. It was like, this book is whack. Is the book is great. It just wasn't for you.
Right, 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 right.
It just wasn't for you. And so now that we're talking about like color schemes, right? Is there some best practices for like color schemes, fonts, imagery, all the things? What are your thoughts around that?
I think visually, number one, best practice is make sure everything correlates, like we just mentioned. We've got to make sure that your color scheme and font choice and just the overall visual connects with the subject matter in a way. So essentially, let's say that you're talking about holistic practices in nature or something. Like, let's just take that for example. You're going to
Mhm.
want to maybe focus on something that's has earth tones, greens, things that bring life, healing, etc. So we want to always consider, visually, even down to just small things like color, etc. We want to make sure that those are actually correlating. I would also argue to say that make sure everything on the cover is legible. Sometimes we get a little fancy with our font choice. I want this in script with all
Yeah,
the curly cues and that is all not often always essential for you to have a fancy font. Something simple, clean, legible will and that people can see, like we would say off rip. Something that we can see off rip. Like we need to be able to read your
mhm,
title, like automatically see what this is about, connect with it, limit yourself to 1 to 2 fonts. Sometimes for me, when I do work that is maybe type focused,
mhm,
I would limit myself to 2 fonts, but let's say there's one specific word. For example, the Pieces of a Woman cover. The word woman is in script and all the other words are in a sans serif simplified font. But that's
yeah,
because we want to place emphasis on the fact that we are talking to women. We want to emphasize the feeling of femininity. So even if there was no imagery on your cover, your font can still speak for itself. So
sure.
we don't always have to think that images have to be a way that we convey what we're trying to say. We can also do that through typography and the way that we use fonts. So legibility is important. Color correlation to your subject matter is important. Legibility and just keep it simple and keep it clean. And it also depends on whether you're talking about nonfiction and fiction books, right?
Yeah, I was
So
just gonna ask about that.
so in that space where we're talking about nonfiction, usually we're talking about autobiography, self-help books, things that are kind of like tools, like we're
Sure.
talking about real life subject matter. So everything that we do visually has to correlate to that. Now, fiction gives you a little bit more leeway to play with imagery, color, dynamics, because you're going to need a real sneak peek into what the journey the book is going to take you on, right? So
Right.
fiction is taking you on a journey. So does nonfiction, but in a different way. But
Mhm.
fiction has got to get your brain going. So the visual elements on your cover have to give you like this sense of intrigue into how the story is going to develop.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think you made a very good point that both are taking the reader on a journey, right? One is in the nonfiction space is a lot more information based. So you're really teaching something and taking them from A to point B
Right.
versus a fictional book. They're going on a journey of the minds, of the emotions. And so you definitely want that cover to be more insightful of the storyline. But both spaces are a journey, and both covers need to communicate the journey, if you will, where the reader is going to embark on once they grab your book. Um, so I'm in full agreement with all that. I really appreciate what you just said because as a publisher, sometimes I'm the big bad wolf who be like, nah, we're not doing and I can't say it like that, but in my head, my junior publisher will ping me, the business manager will ping, and I be, they're not doing that. They're not doing that. God bless you, but you will never. And not because I'm a stickler, but
Right.
because I have an understanding of what is and what is not necessary. And authors sometimes, especially first time authors, it's their baby,
Yes. Yes.
And I'm sensitive to the understanding. Huh? You like that language? I'm sensitive and understanding that you have your vision, you have your heart literally set on something, and everybody wants to be different.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be different. Everybody wants to stand out. And so I think to reach that goal, we get creative, huh?
Yeah.
The book cover ideas. And I think it's something that the authors need to understand is that you're already standing out. And the reason why I say that is because we have to become okay with the fact that your book is not for everybody. Your book is for the target audience. The book is for the target reader. And so, what sets your book apart is that it's specific in who it's speaking to,
Right.
because there's so many messages, but this book is for Chazney. This book is for the Chazneys of the world that's
Mhm.
already standing out, because there's so many messages that's being thrown to Chazney. But when it's so right that she can't deny this book is for me, it stood out.
Right.
And
Right.
you
Right. Right.
didn't need fancy fonts. You didn't need 17 colors. You didn't need your sorority on there. You didn't need your family portrait on there to do that. And so I really appreciate you saying that that's important, even from a design standpoint, to be clear,
Yes.
because that's what we need. Like, that's the overall objective rather, for your book cover and for your manuscript, is clarity.
Yep.
You do not want to confuse the reader, and you don't want a book cover for marketing purposes that's also confusing, because your book is going to sit on the shelf,
Right. Right.
and we want it to fly
Interesting.
off the
Correct.
shelf.
Sell out.
Right. We want it to fly off the shelf, people. So thanks for sharing that tip. And so you shared this as a designer, right?
Mhm.
You gave the designer's input. What should authors look for when they're looking for the Chastens of the world, when they're looking for a quality graphic designer? What should a fictional author look for, and what should a non-fictional author look for?
Okay, so we'll just talk about in general for both genres what you should look for first, and then maybe we can, segue and cross in between. So,
Sure.
for both, I would essentially say a portfolio, like,
Mm,
you know,
receipts.
receipts. We need the receipts that shows that you do what you do and you do what you do well.
Yes.
There are a lot of designers who don't design everything. There are niche designers. So you could even go as far to look online or wherever resources you may find to look for designers that specialize in book design. So there are actually some designers that specialize in book covers and publications.
Mhm,
There are
mhm.
also designers that do a variety of work like myself that have worked with different companies, different people, but sometimes when you go on their portfolios, what may capture you is their use of color. So let's say we're talking about something that regarding joy and, living life to the fullest. Let's say that's the subject matter. You're going to want somebody who works well with color. They do color theory very well. And if you go on their portfolio and you're like, okay, this is jumping out at me, that would be the designer that would essentially be for you. If you're a person who's very minimal, you live a minimal life and you don't want something that's super, out there, fancy, you want something that's structured, that's what you would look for in somebody's portfolio. Also, references. Don't be afraid to get out here and say, hey, I'm in search of a book cover designer. And if you see on that specific status, multiple people, let's say your sphere of influence, multiple people are saying the same person, that may be somebody you want to look into because they have backing from multiple people that they're good, that they have good work,
Yeah.
so those would be some leading elements: asking for references, checking their portfolio specifically. Also, if you get further into the process and you say, hey, I like this designer, I think I'm going to write them and check them out, be sure that you're with somebody or that you connect with someone who sees you as a partner and not just somebody who to get money from.
That's
I would
good.
argue to say that since you're writing something that is going to make an impact in some way, that the designer you choose is going to walk alongside you in this process, right? So, writing your book and creating your book was a journey for you. Design is also a journey. Personally, I like to partner with my clients and make sure that I'm able to um, comprehend their vision, also ask clarifying questions to make sure that whatever I'm creating is on target with that vision. You also have to be conscious of if your if your designer is a good communicator, honestly, because you're communicating, you're right, you're communicating words, you need to make sure for this project in particular that your designer is a good communicator, because you want to be able to know that what they bring to life, even in verbiage and what they're communicating back to you in those initial conversations, is something that you already know. Okay, they get me. You know, your
Yeah.
designer needs to get you and to get where they're going, get you where you need to go.
That's good, ma'am. That was a whole word. And you know what I appreciate is that you didn't spend as much time talking about if they could design. You spent more time talking about the business of this. And I think it's so important that when we are outsourcing work, that we be mindful that we're not friends, that this is a business. And
It
so
is.
I don't need you to just be able to design work. I need you to be able to stick to timelines. I need you to be able to communicate expectations. I need you to be able to communicate billing. I need you to be able to identify something that you need clarity on, because I'm leaning on you to be the consultant, if you will, in this process, because the book cover could completely throw off your publishing time frame and your
Correct.
publishing timeline. So having someone who could communicate and who can stick to deadlines is so important, because you can get 5 stars off of your work, but what are people saying about working with
With
you?
you. Yes.
You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
that's
The
so.
relationship element outweigh, sometimes it will outweigh the
Mhm.
quality of the work,
Yeah,
honestly.
it's experience.
Yeah, for sure. I
Mhm.
That's essential, and oftentimes, I will literally have people say, "Wow, like I'm so glad we even were able to hop on a call." Like right now there are some people who are like, I correspond via email only, and it's like, the but I need to actually talk to you to get to this place of clarity that we need to be. And if you're working with someone who isn't um just a little bit flexible. I won't say that, the designer and client relationship does need to have a little bit of flexibility
Mhm.
within an overall structure, right? So we
Yeah.
need to understand that we're on a schedule, that we have a timeline, that we're trying to get to such and such deadline, that there's a certain budget that needs to be met, all of those things. Um, but there needs to be that sense of, if I need to call you, can we just hop on a quick call? Or, some things can't be explained just through email. You
Yeah.
have to really get a sense of, you have to do some digging. I would argue too that if your designer's not asking you questions, that's problematic. Like if they're just leaning on you for information and not really digging to see, okay, if you reach a point in a project where you're like, okay, something's not hitting, let's see how we can dig a bit more to get to the desired goal here. You got to have somebody who can ask you pointed questions to get you to where you want to go, because sometimes I have clients who may not have the verbiage visual for design speak,
Yeah.
but we can still get somewhere because I'm asking, okay, let's see, how do you feel about this? What are you trying to get your audience to feel? Okay, if this color is not working for you, how can we get to a happy medium to where this is something that I feel like will offer the feeling
Mhm.
that you're going for, but let's see if we can get some alternatives there. So there has to be a little bit of flex in the relationship, um where you can kind of, get to those points of clarity like you were saying, because clarity is key once again.
Clarity is key. And I think what I hear you saying is the designer has to understand the objective of the book,
Yes.
to where the designer should be able to tell you, if you are marketing to teenage boys, it shouldn't be a cover in pink. Like
Correct.
your designer should be able to tell you. You don't want a peanut gallery, right? You want a relationship. You want us to be able to connect and communicate and to enjoy each other's company and all those fun things. But it's okay if your designer gives you pushback, because you are also not just getting their design techniques, you're getting all of their experience, and you want that.
Correct.
You want an author who can tell you what will or won't rock, depending on who your audience is. Because if not, the goal and the purpose, the intention, the benefit of your book cover will not be executed if it's just through happenstance and it's just giving you whatever you want. Whatever you want needs to be in alignment with the content of the book, with the audience of the book, with the timeline that you want the book to be published. All alignment is key. And if you don't have a designer who can support you with being in alignment, that is a problem.
Also, alignment has to do with like process, right? So,
Mhm.
and I say that because my process includes research. If I don't
Yeah.
know who you're like, what if I'm not familiar with the market that you're trying to target, my process is going to include research. It's not always a well, it is about making things pretty, essentially aesthetically pleasing. But to get to that place where design and content meet, there has to be an element of research. So if you're connecting with the designer that's not fully familiar with, your target audience, there still has to be some level of a level of research, and you'll know by the work that you receive back whether or not this person understands where you're trying to go.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
your designer has to be willing to do a little background work, or even ask you for the background work, like, hey,
Mhm.
so since you've been involved this is in this industry for however many years, what would you say are the top three things that this audience is looking for
Yeah.
in whatever materials they look at or go by in this specific industry, or whatever the case may be? So I would say that research is a good component to who you connect with, and if they're asking you those questions that are key to your industry, if they themselves are not familiar.
Right. 1,000%. And I feel like what you're getting into, Chaz, is the process of design work. So can you go a little deeper in beyond the research? What else is typical or common? I'm aware that every designer does their own thing, but what are some fundamental things that occur during the book cover designing process?
So from inception, we always have our discovery calls where we talk to the clients about title, content, audience, etc. But when we started the design process, at least for me, and every designer is different, but
Mm-hmm.
the designer should be able to communicate their process, right? So
Absolutely.
in my process, when I connect with you, I'm talking to you about the content of the work, but I'm also, upon that, I'm doing my research. I may send a mood board. If you don't already have established color themes that you're looking for, I'll send a mood board with some visuals, colors, and things like that, just to make sure visually I'm tracking with where you want to go. And then from that point on, I may offer maybe a few thumbnail sketches, because I actually have a background in fine art. So a lot of the things that I create are created by hand first before they even reach the computer. So that's a part of my process as
I
well.
told y'all she was the dopest. Carry on. She said, I have a background in fine art, so majority of my stuff I drew by hand, huh? All right.
Just it wasn't meant to be a flex, but if that's a flex, we will take it. We will take it on today. Sometimes when you think about the things that you do, they're so automatic that you don't even think about it like that until
Said
somebody
I
else points it
did
out
it
to you.
by hand. Who
Yeah.
does stuff by hand anymore? It's
No, a lot of people, honestly, Janae, in my industry, it is very a lot. Some designers don't even know how to draw.
that's
And
what I'm saying.
yeah,
Like
times have
it's
changed.
a flex, honey. I apologize. Carry on.
No, you're good. You're good. So I may do a few, thumbnail sketches just to highlight layout choices and things of that nature and see what resonates before hopping into the computer and selecting fonts and different things of that nature. And then those thumbnail sketches might be some rough colored compositions in the computer, And then once that process narrows down to, hey, I'm really feeling this layout very strongly, then we'll build out the final cover and elements accordingly. But yeah, the process, for me at least, has its stages. Those stages are outlined from the beginning. I send documentation to my clients explaining my process, explaining stage one, stage two, how things go. And then, we have a full working machine towards your final book cover.
And so, also something in the process I wanted to ask was revisions.
Mm-hmm.
Is revisions included in a package? Is that an upsell? How does revisions work with the design process?
So revisions, at least for me, are included in the design package when we talk. We were talking about more than likely 3 rounds of revisions.
Okay.
So let me see how I can explain how this actually works. So let's say we get to, I show you based on the narrowed down thumbnail sketches and things like that I present initially, we choose which direction that will go in, and then I'll send the first mock of, where I'm going with the artwork, right? And then you may say, hey, can we try a different font, or can we try a different color for this? And we'll begin the rounds of revisions. Or, hey, there's a typo. Usually round one of revisions assess the entire design in its totality, from words, color, visuals, all of those things. Each time you enter a round of revisions, assess everything that you're seeing. So round one, I'm assessing everything. Round two, we've made some updates. Okay, I'm okay with this font choice, but I'm still not sure about the color. Okay, we'll begin next into round three. And then round three should, if I say I allot 3 rounds of revisions, round three, the last set of revisions should be, okay, we've made it to our destination and we've cut that off. Now, if we're still not done by round three, for me, additional rounds of revisions may cost an extra fee. Sometimes, depending on what the revision is, if it's just like, oh, I need to change a letter because I copy and paste it wrong or something of that case, that shouldn't be that big of a deal. But oftentimes I've found that if clients are not clear
Mm-hmm.
with where they want to be, we will get into an extensive revision process that will probably,
Back
cost
up.
a little more than what you were envisioning initially. But before you even contact your designer, just make sure you're clear about where you want to go to, just so that you don't run later on into this space where visually we're taking all of these different turns and the process gets lengthy, not only for you but also for your designer as well.
I'm so glad you brought up clarity, because something that I find is the inability to make a decision and to commit. And sometimes we have to just run the play.
We do.
We just have to run the play. And I will encourage that. We are aware that you judge a book by its cover. And so your book cover is the face of your book. And I could only imagine how important it is for the authors to make sure that it's just right. But perfection is an illusion, you know? And I think that we work so hard to try to accomplish something that doesn't exist. And I think that instead of striving for perfection, we need to strive for peace. Are you at peace with this design? Are you at peace with the manuscript? Are you at peace with the process? And I think that you can create perfection defined by you. And
Yes.
a lot of times there is a lot of back and forth, because to your point, isn't any clarity and there isn't any peace.
Hmm.
And so I encourage authors to, once you get to the design process, be very intentional about who you are selecting to be your designer. And the reason why that's so important is because your designer also serves as a consultant. This is their wheelhouse, and you're going to have to trust them. You know,
I
you're
literally
going
was
to,
going to mention that too. Trust
yeah.
is essential. And sometimes we know who we can't trust, you know?
Mhm.
Our intuition, our guts will often say upon a discovery call with somebody like, I don't want to work with them. I
Yeah.
don't care how cool their portfolio is. I don't care how many awards they have. I'm just not feeling it.
Mhm.
And, you know, like you mentioned earlier on, it's like, this is my baby, especially first time authors. This
Yeah.
is my baby. Like, I am
Mhm.
trusting you with my baby. And you have to feel that initial sense of trust because,
Mhm.
like you said, trust has to be there in order for you to be receptive to feedback.
Right.
Has to be there in order for somebody to say, hey, I think it's important that we pivot because I don't think this is going to be successful. And you have to, you're essentially paying, like you said before, for somebody's experience. You know, if someone, especially, I can't say that every designer is what do you call it, has a formal education
Mhm.
in graphic design. Some people are self-taught, you know, but experience still requires learning, right? So this person is self-taught, but they've push themselves or immerse themselves in this material and in this content enough for them to have a solid foundation to get you where you need to be, right?
Mhm.
So you're investing
Yeah.
in someone's education, someone's experience, where they have, you know, like just like you have may have experience in whatever subject matter you're writing about. It's that on the opposite end for the designer. You're not just
Absolutely.
hiring us to make your dream come to life. You're hiring us because we have valuable insight and foundation in our craft. Like this is something that's a part of our life essentially.
Their DNA. And
Yeah.
that's why I preface this by saying get a quality design. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about everybody. I'm really only talking about Chazney. But but is this is why it matters. And I'm glad that you mentioned the word investment
Mhm.
because I've been in the publishing space for some years and I've seen things change over time. Fat Joe said, you know, yesterday's price is not today's
It's
price.
not
And a lot
today's
of
price.
people look
Come
at
on.
the cost and don't see the investment. Because when I started open book publishing in 2019, book covers was going for like 550 to 750. You see, she laughing. It ain't gonna happen with Chazney Thomas. Like book covers could easily go for like $1,200.
Mhm,
It's close to rent. If I
mhm.
mean, we know you from Miami, so rent is still like $2,200, but nevertheless,
Right.
um, it's close to rent. It's close to mortgage. It's certainly beyond a car payment. But you have to invest. What you get in, what you put in is what you get out. And you have to invest in getting someone who has not just experience in the graphic space, but experience working with people. They have experience with the type of book you're doing because genres matter, right? They have, because, and granted, I acknowledge that I've been in publishing, right? But there's never been a 5, 6, 7, 8 revisions process because the graphic designers that I work with help me get to a place of clarity at the discovery call.
Right.
You
Right.
understand what I'm saying?
Right.
There's a lot of
Mhm.
stuff that I never had to deal with because I was working with quality. And so quality requires a different level of investment. And I
Facts.
think that we have to be mindful of our budget, but be clear about our expectation. And I
Right.
think it's possible to go to a freelancing website and find somebody who can do your stuff for $50. It's possible.
It
If
is
you are
possible.
distributing on Amazon, Amazon now has, excuse me, this Amazon KDP, they now have a feature where you can design the cover right there. You can,
You
you
can.
can,
You
you
can.
you 1,000% can. But I think for your book cover to do what it needs to do, you need to hire the right person and entrust them to do what needs to be done.
Right.
And
Agree.
something that I didn't know when we were doing book covers was how some details translate on my screen, but don't translate on the book, like once you print it. And
Mhm.
so, my last question, Chasney, is help authors to understand the different formats that the book needs to be saved in, and different, and ensuring that colors are translated, because what looks like something in your email when they send it to you versus what it looks on social media versus how it looks when it's printed, the colors could change. The fine detailing that you're so committed to could change. So could you talk about that, just to make sure that we have a consistent facing book cover in all of the spaces?
So, just to make sure that your content translates from web to print, designers create in web and print. So, the
Mm,
color codes are different for print than they are for web. So, in web, um, we're working with RGB, and for print, we're working in CMYK. So all of your materials should be saved distinctly for print and for web. And you should be able to ask your designer, hey, will I receive these files, designated for print and for web? And you can talk with your designer about that. For your print publications, like I will often ask my client, what are the specs we're working with? Once your client may know, like, the size of their book, etc. Depending on who they're printing through, even printing companies have specific ways that your book needs to be laid out for print, right? So your printing company may have their own template for printing that your designer will need to lay out your book cover in to make sure it gets printed correctly. So beyond the design, your designer needs to know how to work with different printing. They have the flexibility to work with different printing companies, and to make sure they know how to adapt your work to whatever printing template that the printing company needs in order for them to go into production. So I would say making sure your designer provides your files in both print and web qualities, RGB and CMYK, and also that you can find whatever template is needed for the print company, and
mhm.
that your designer can format your book to whatever template is provided, that it can successfully go into production with whoever you're printing with.
Absolutely. And that's something else authors you should be looking for when you are identifying a person to do your cover design, is to see if they have this skill set and this knowledge base, and they're asking you to give them the specs before they even start. You don't want to get the book cover, give it to the people who are printing and distributing your book, and then the covers are not coming out the way
Right.
that you
Yeah.
saw them when you got your sketches back. And so making sure that's something that's discussed in your discovery call. And in my opinion, it should be within the designer's processes, where they are telling you, and for me to move forward on this project, I need you to give me all of these specs, because I have to do all of these things, because that's what a book cover designer is going to do. Your
Mhm.
book is not just sitting on your email looking at the proof, right? Is how it's going to print, like she said, website, social, how it looks on your email, how it looks when you print it, all those things matter. So ensuring that you have a designer who has that knowledge base is key, because we have to print your book, authors. We have to print your books, authors. Well, Miss Chazney Thomas, I thank you so very, very, very much.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I always enjoy talking to you and digging through all things design in general. So thank you for having me.
Of course, Chasteney gathers me in all my pieces, because I am the bratty author. I am. I'm the bratty author. So I understand authors, even though it probably doesn't seem like that when you work with me, because I'd be like, nah. But I'm the bratty author. So you're like, what do you mean? Love this.
We deliver hard truths in love.
We
We deliver
do, we
hard truths in
do,
love.
we do.
Yes,
So
we
you
do.
need that also to be a skill set of your designer.
Yes, deliver hard truths in love.
In love. And so, Chasten, before we wrap up, can you share with us how can we connect with you, how can we work with you, and all those good things?
Alrighty, to connect with me, you can reach me at my website, chazneythomas.com. That is my portfolio site, and there's also a way that you can submit inquiries for projects that way. Also, you can reach me on social on IG at chazney.thomas. I'm also on Twitter at chazney_.thomas, and on Facebook, you can find me at Chazney Thomas.
Awesome, awesome. And of course, good people, when you are ready to write and publish your book in 180 days or less, be sure to connect with Open Book Publishing on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We are OB Publishing, and also visit our website, which is www.obpublishing.com. And authors, thank you for tuning in for this episode of Dear Authors, discussing all things book cover design. And I like to leave you guys with an affirmation. So, my affirmation for today is: Dear author, stay in creative alignment. From your book cover to the content of your book to the publishing timeline of your book, be very clear and be in alignment with that clarity. All right, good people, be well. And until next time, we will see you soon. Bye, authors.